Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are back with another edition of the Underhive Wars. This is our series of Necromunda battle reports for our Dominion campaign for Sector 7. This is battle report number 5 and is fought between my two friends, Dark Lord Mac as well as Sergeant Sigmarine. So if you're watching the introduction video and you're wondering why Mark Morrison's Return of the Mac was playing, that's because I made a deal with my friend Dark Lord Mac that I would always play that song every single time we do a battle report with him. Because, you know, we're geeks that way. So my friend Dark Lord Mac, he's bringing Section 8, which is a Venators gang, and he's going up against Sergeant Sigmarine with his Sleeping Dogs, which is a House Delaque gang. So this is the very first time both these gangs are fighting each other. They're also playing a standoff scenario. So because of that, we're going to play some background music real quick. We're going to show you with the pictures of the gangs as well as their rosters. If you want to see exactly which both gangs are bringing, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So with that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll. So let's go ahead and talk about the scenario rules real quick. This is a standoff scenario, and the objective is to take out as many of the enemy as possible. It's a good old-fashioned gang fight. What ends up happening is that you are assigning point totals to each of the different members of the gang. If you can take out a leader, it equals to 3 points, champions are worth 2 points, and gangers and juves and hierons are all worth 1 point apiece. And by the end of the scenario, whoever has the most points accumulated is the winner of the scenario. For the winner, when it comes to money, the winner manages to gets D6 times 10 credits, the loser earns D6 times 5 credits. When it comes to experience points, you get +1 experience for each fighter who survives the scenario. Also, the winning gang leader also earns an additional experience point. And of course, you get additional experience points for taking out champions and leaders and different fighters as usual. And for the reputation, the winner of the scenario earns +2 to their reputation. Both gangs will receive 1 point reputation for fighting against each other for the very first time. And if your gang bottles out, you lose 1 point of reputation. So those are the scenario rules for this one. Now it's time for the battle plan. This is an overhead shot of the entire battlefield. As you can see, my friends are playing on a 4x4 table. My friend Dark Lord Mac and his Section 8 is located on the near side of the table, while my other friend Sergeant Sigmarine and his Sleeping Dogs are deployed on the far side of the table. As you can see, we have a network of buildings of either side. It looks like of an elevated walkway that goes through the middle of the battlefield. There's also cars as well as hedgehogs. If you'll notice, those little I-beam structures that are scattered throughout that look like caltrops, those are what are called hedgehogs. They're anti-tank obstacles that people used to make to stop tanks during Modern Warfare, and those are a recent addition that's brought on by my resident terrain creator Iron Major. He made those up for our battle reports. Also, if you'll notice, you'll see little gangplanks as well scattered throughout the battlefield. That was also newly created by Iron Major as well, so we're pretty happy about that. So Iron Major, if you're watching this, thank you very much for your terrain that you made for this battlefield. And as for the battle plan, I'm not really sure what my friends are thinking about when they're playing this. I'm just taking pictures of the battlefield, so you would have to ask them what their plan was. But from the looks of it, it looks like they're just going to try to, throw it down and try to kill each other as quickly as possible. So with the battle plan over with, we go directly to deployment. Alright, so starting from our friend Dark Lord Mac with Section 8. In the left-hand side, he has Red Cap Killer. That is a hunter champion who's carrying a plasma pistol as well as a bolt pistol. And he's also got the gunfighter ability, so he's pretty deadly. In the middle, my friend's deployment zone is where a majority of his hunters can be found. He has 3 of his hunters up in the front. On the left-hand side, that is Val the Impaler. He has a hunter's armor with a harpoon gun as well as a bolt pistol. In the middle is the Kurgan. He has 2 servo claws is what he has to fight with. And on the right-hand side, that is, I believe that's Buzzkill. That's the guy who has a rock saw as well as a plasma pistol. And then right behind them is his gang leader. That's the hunt leader. His name is the Saracen. He's armed with a hotshot laser pistol. I think he also has a sword as well as some armor as well, and that makes up the center deployment for my friend Dark Lord Mac. And finally on the right hand side, that is Red Harvest. That's his second hunt champion in his gang. He's armed with a long rifle. He's also got I believe he has fast shot, so you can shoot twice during the shooting phase with him, so he's also pretty deadly as well. And that makes up the deployment for Section 8. Meanwhile, across the battlefield on the for the sleeping dogs, on the left-hand side, right next to the West Superette, you have two members of the gang in the back. That is John St. Jude. That is my friend's champion. He's armed with twin, I believe, bolt pistols is what he's armed with for that. No, I'm sorry, not twin bolt pistols, twin last pistols. That's what he's armed with. The back there, and then right next to him on the right-hand side, that is Mr. Slick, Mr. Smug. That guy's armed with a shotgun, which has scatter as well as solid shot, and he's just a normal ganger. In the center of the battlefield is where my friend Sergeant Sigmund deployed most of his forces. On the left-hand side, on the ground level of that walkway, he has his two juvies. That is Ghost on the left-hand side and Noob on the right-hand side. And both those juvies are armed with auto pistols. On the top level of the elevated walkway, he has three more members of his gang. And the back, that is his leader. That is Mr. Sinister. He's armed with a long rifle that has a telescopic sight as well as a suppressor as well, so that's a pretty deadly kit out. Up there he also has Silk as well as Spectre. I believe Miss Silk is armed with an auto gun, and then Spectre's armed with a last gun. And those are the three members of his gang on the top of that elevated walkway. And finally, on the right-hand side of the elevated walkway on the ground level, he's got two more of his gang. On the right-hand side, that is Painless Joe. That is his champion. He's armed with a plasma gun. And right next to him is a ganger named Napalm Ned, and he's armed with a flamer. And that makes up my friend's deployment on this one. So with that being said, both of my friends go directly to the top of turn number 1, and they roll off for initiative to see who has priority. So the top of turn number 1 goes directly to the Delaques. My friend Sergeant Sigmund managed to take the priority on this one. So the first thing he does, he activates Painless Joe, who then also in turn also activates Napalm Ned. And all they do is they actually spend a double movement moving down the walkway on the ground level, staying behind the pillars as well as support structures, so that way they don't get shot at. They're just heading straight down the middle of the battlefield, straight towards my friend Dark Lord Mac. In response, my friend Dark Lord Mac then activates Red Harvest, who then decides to use both of his actions in order to shoot his long rifle. And the only person he can target against is Napalm Ned, because of the angle that they're located at. Napalm Ned can be partially seen. He does suffer a -1 to hit against him because Napalm Ned is partially behind cover, but because the long rifle is shooting at a long distance, it gets a +1 to hit. So because of that, that kind of just evens it out. To make matters worse, this guy, Red Harvest, he has a 2-up ballistic skill, so unless he's rolling once, he's pretty much going to be hitting you, especially with that really powerful long rifle. And not only does he manage to hit Napalm Ned twice, he also manages to wound him twice as well. When it came to the injury though, he suffered 2 flesh wounds, so because of that, Napalm Ned is easier to wound, but he's still kind of deadly because he can still shoot, he can still fight, and he's still a threat. So kind of a lackluster shot for my friend Dark Lord Mac against this ganger. In response to that, my friend Sergeant Sigmund then decided to activate John St. Jude, his gang champion, as well as Mr. Smug, his ganger. They've just spent the turn doing a double movement, moving towards the building of the Precinct 13 building on the left-hand side of the battlefield. He just moves them right directly towards cover, looks like he's trying to assault on the left-hand flank for Section 8. And that makes up the activation on this side of the battlefield. Dark Lord Mac then activates his hunter champion, that is Red Cap Killer, who spends a double movement ordering to the wall right next to Precinct 13 as well. Looks like he's planning to sending that guy to intercept the 2 men who are coming around the left-hand side from the Delaques. Sergeant Sigmund then activates his Juvie Ghost, who spends a double movement moving down the center of the street, taking cover behind that pylon of the elevated walkway. And then Dark Lord Matt activates the Saracen, and because he has the commanding presence skill, he also activates the 3 other hunters within his group. All 4 members actually spin up a double movement heading down the middle of the street, heading towards the Delaques. On the left-hand side, Vel the Impaler moves up to that barbed wire fence that is right next to the lower right-hand corner of the Precinct 13 building. At the same time, Buzzkill as well as the Kurgan spin a double movement moving towards the pylon there underneath the elevated walkway, heading towards the center of the battlefield, and then he has the Saracen bringing up the back behind them, lending his support. And that pretty much makes up all of Section 8's movement as well as activations. So the rest of the turn will be dedicated to the Delaques of the Sleeping Dogs. For the rest of the turn, Sergeant Sigmund then activates Noob, who's his other juvie. He spends a double movement going right next to Ghost, taking cover right in the center of the pylon there, right beneath the elevated walkway. And then finally he activates Mr. Sinister, who then in turn activates Silk as well as Spectre. They spend a double movement walking down the center walkway in the top, and also taking that gangplank over into the top level of the Quantum building. And they're just located right there taking cover because they spent their entire activation phase moving. And so when it comes to the end phase, we skip the end phase because nobody got shot, so there's no need for recovery tests, and there's no need for bottle tests either. So because of that, that takes us directly to the end of turn number 1. So here's an overhead shot of end of turn number 1, so that way you guys can see exactly what's going on in the battlefield. As you can see, both Precinct 13, not Precinct 13, I'm sorry, both the Section 8 as well as the Sleeping Dogs are moving towards each other right beneath that walkway there, using the walkway as cover and hiding behind the pylon so that way they don't get shot at the same time. As you can see on the left-hand side, that's the Precinct 13 building that's in the middle of the left-hand side of the table. My friend's 2 gangers are assaulting along the flank on that left-hand side, and he looks like my friend Dark Lord Mac is sending Redcap Killer as well as Val the Impaler to kind of intercept them there on the left hand side. On the top of the walkway there on the near side of the table, you can see Red Harvest in his sniper position. He's going to be having some serious troubles here in a little bit because the Quantum building, which is the far upper right hand corner, is where 3 members of the Sleeping Dogs are located at. And as you can kind of see in the middle of the table there, right on the ground level, you can see both Section 8 as well as Sleeping Dogs moving along the main axis of the road, heading towards each other for a final confrontation. So with the end of turn number 1, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and both my friends roll off to see who has priority. Alright, so we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and my friend Sergeant Stingray managed to take the priority again. Both Dark Lord Mac and Sergeant Stingray, when they roll their d6s, he would go first. They both roll 4s, and since Sergeant Stingray gets to determine who wins draws, he decides he's going to go next. So the first thing he does is he activates his gang champion, John St. Jude, who also activates Mr. Smug. And they both spend a turn doing a double movement going into the middle of the Precinct 13 building. So it looks like there's a couple things that he could do. He could actually send his forces up to the ceiling if he need to the roof, so that way he can lay down some covering fire. But since both these guys are kitted out for close combat, I'm thinking what my friend is trying to do is flank Section 8 through the right hand side by assaulting through the building and then hopefully getting the flank on the right hand side of Section 8 is what it looks like my buddy is trying to do. And so that makes up the turn number 2 for the Delaques. In response, my friend Dark Lord Matt then activates Redcap Killer, who then just moves a normal 5 inches around the corner through the barbed wire opening between the barbed wire fence as well as a Precinct 13 building, and he looks right through the windows at both those gang members and he takes aim with both of his pistols. He's carrying both a bolt pistol as well as a plasma gun, and since he has the gunfighter ability, he doesn't have to worry about taking any penalties for shooting both weapons at exactly the same time. So he takes careful aim at both John St. Jude as well as Mr. Smug. He opens up with his plasma pistol on John St. Jude, and he takes his bolt pistol and opens up on Mr. Smug inside him. He manages to hit both those guys as well as to wound them. So as you can see from the result of that, he managed to put John St. Jude out of action because that plasma pistol causes, I believe, 2 damage is what it does. So because of that, John St. Jude is now out of action. He will need to roll up on an injury after the end of the scenario to see what happens to him. At the same time, he also managed to seriously injured Mr. Smug, so because of that, he's just kind of laying on the ground bleeding at this point. In exchange, my friend Sergeant Stingray then activates his Juvie Ghost, who then charges all the way across the battlefield in a long distance charge and manages to engage the Redcap Killer into close combat. Now they both do fight against each other, but unfortunately for both my friends, neither one managed to land a blow. They just kind of flub the rolls with primarily 2s and 1s. While Redcap Killer is deadly at shooting, he's not so great at close combat, so because of that, nothing much happens. And you know, Ghost is a Juvie, so nothing much really is going to happen for his combat either. So the two of them are just kind of still struggling at this point. So, not willing to risk the chance of losing his gang champion, my friend Dark Lord Mac then activates Val the Impaler, who then also charges into the fray as well and gangs up on Ghost. So because of that, now the Juvie Ghost has now had to worry about another hunter who's fighting him in close combat. Needless to say, Val the Impaler had no problem whatsoever putting down Ghost the Juvie, so because of that, both members of Section 8 are still good, and also Val the Impaler nailed himself an additional experience point for taking out a Juvie. So in response to that, my friend Sergeant Stingray then activates his next member of his gang. He activates Painless Joe, who then also in turn activates Napalm Ned because he's a gang champion. So the first thing he does, he actually has Napalm Ned move across the corner with his flamer, and because he can move, he opens up with the flamer, and not only does he shoot, but his flamer template, if you notice, actually hits both Redcap Killer as well as Val the Impaler. So both those guys are now engulfed in a huge sheet of flame being shot at by that flamer by Napalm Ned. He does manage to cause injuries on both of those fighters. He puts Val the Impaler out of action, so because of that, Val the Impaler will need to roll up on the injury table after the end of the scenario to see what happens to him, also netting Napalm Ned an additional experience point. He also managed to put 1 wound onto Redcap Killer. Now, Redcap Killer has 2 wounds, so he doesn't really have to worry about that. However, he did fail his blaze test, so now he catches on fire, and he ran forward like 6 inches towards that barbed wire fence there on the left-hand side because, you know, he's burning up, and things are not looking very good for my friend Dark Lord Mac. Then in response, because Sergeant Sigmarine still has Painless Joe, he then activates him and has him open fire with his plasma gun. He goes after a low shot with rapid fire, and he rolls up 2 hits with the rapid fire dice onto Redcap Killer. Both those shots actually manage to hit him as well as to wound him as well. As you can see, Redcap Killer earns 2 flesh wounds, so because of that he's only dropped down to 1. One more flesh wound, he is out of action at that point. At the same time, the other injured roll ended up being seriously injured, so because of that, Redcap Killer is now on the ground. And to make things worse, he's still on fire. So now he's been shot with a plasma gun, he's on the ground, he's carrying flesh wounds, and he's lit on fire. Needless to say, Redcap Killer is having a very, very bad day. So not to be outdone, Dark Lord Mac then activates Red Harvest again, and Red Harvest takes aim with his sniper rifle from his long rifle and opens up on Napalm Ned. So Red Harvest takes careful aim with his long rifle and manages to hit Napalm Ned. Not only does he manage to hit him, but he also managed to wound him as well. Actually, when it came to the wound, he actually put a serious injury on him, so because that Napalm Ned is currently down on the ground, bleeding out. He then tries to take his second shot and try to hit Painless Joe, but unfortunately for him, though, he missed his shot. He rolled a 1 to shoot him, so because of that, nothing really much happens from there. So a lot of action and death taking place in the middle of the battlefield right now for this scenario. So, not risking the fact that Redcap Killer can get back on his feet again and gun down his gang champion, my friend Sergeant Sigmarine then activates the Juvie Noob, who then charges directly into Redcap Killer and engages him into close combat. And this guy is already seriously injured on the ground with a flesh wound. Noob also then, of course, activates a coup de grace and manages to put Redcap Killer out of misery. So because of that, Redcap Killer does go out of action, and he will also need to roll up on the injury table to see what happens to him at the end of the battle report. So things are not looking very good for my friend Dark Lord Mac, because he just lost 2 members of his gang, and his gang is not very big to begin with because they are Venators, so things are not looking good right now. So, add an aggravation and a combination of anger, Dark Lord Mac then activates the Saracen, who then also activates the Kurgan as well as Buzzkill. He actually sends the Kurgan up 6 inches to right behind that SUV right there in the middle of the battlefield, heading towards the rest of the Delaques. The Kurgan is kitted out for fighting. He's really good at close combat. He has 2 servo claws. He also has a really high strength as well as toughness, but as a result of that, his movement's only 3 inches at a time. So because of that, he's about the speed of a dwarf. So he's not going very quickly. So he takes cover behind that car. Dark Lord Matt then also activates Saracen as well as Buzzkill, and both those guys actually open up with their pistols, and they do manage to hit Painless Joe. Unfortunately for them, though, when they rolled to hit him, they both rolled 6s. Buzzkill's carrying a plasma pistol, and his plasma pistol has scarce ammo, and then at the same time, the Saracen's shooting with a hotshot power pack, which means that his ammo roll is actually kind of higher for that roll. And actually, when it comes to the hits to see exactly what they do against Painless Joe, I believe it's the Saracen that actually managed to put a wound onto Painless Joe. And unfortunately for my friend Dark Lord Mac, when Buzzkill actually went to shoot with his plasma pistol, all he does, he rolled a 1 to wound, so he failed to wound that guy. So Painless Joe is also pinned at this point because he did get hit with a plasma pistol, but was unable to wound him at that point. And like I said earlier, both the Saracen as well as Buzzkill rolled 6s to hit, so because of that, they both do have to take ammo checks. Unfortunately for Buzzkill, he's completely out of ammo now because plasma pistols are scarce. So because of that, he doesn't get a chance to shoot his pistol for the rest of the battle report. And for my friend, for the Saracen, he fails his ammo roll, so he'll need to spend a simple action next turn in order to reload his gun because he's using a hotshot power pack. So things are not looking very good for my friend Dark Lord Mac at this point. And then my friend Sergeant Sigmarine then activates his leader, Mr. Sinister, who then also activates both Spectre as well as Silk as well. And all 3 of those guys open up and shoot across the battlefield, aiming towards Red Harvest. In the end, Red Harvest actually gets seriously injured. I believe it was Miss Silk, the lady who's armed with an auto gun. I think she's the one who actually managed to hit him both, as well as wound him to both times as well, taking away his wounds and puts him seriously injured. So that's why he's laying face down. I believe Silk missed her shot. At the same time, though, Mr. Sinister, when he opened up with his long rifle, he managed to put a flesh wound on him as well for the damage he managed to do for that guy. So because of that, Red Harvest is on the ground and he is bleeding. So with all the actions done, we go directly to the end phase. And the very first thing that my friend Dark Lord Mac has to do is take a bottle test, and as you can see with the little misfire icon, he failed his bottle test. So because of that, at the beginning of turn number 3, all of his gang members will need to roll off to pass cool checks for them to see if they continue fighting or if they flee off the battlefield. So things are not looking very good for Dark Lord Mac right now. In the recovery portion of the end phase, Red Harvest rolls out of action, so because of that, he will need to roll up on the injury table after the scenario to see what happens to him, also netting additional experience points for Silk, because not only did she manage to take a guy out of action, she also managed to take a champion out of action too, netting herself 2 additional experience points for the end of the scenario. However, in the end, Napalm Ned also rolled it out of action as well, so because of that, Sergeant Sigmarine does lose his Gengar Arm of the Flamer, and he will need to roll up on the injury table at the end of the scenario to see what happens to him as well. And finally, Mr. Smug managed to get back on his feet again. He's carrying additional flesh wounds, so he's a little bit easier to wound now, but he's still a Gengar who's armed with a shotgun, and he's also considerably deadly as well. And finally, here's a picture of the overhead shot of turn number 2 for the battlefield. As you can see, most of the action is taking place right there in the middle of the battlefield, with the fighting taking place in the middle of the street, right on the ground level beneath the elevated walkway. And as you can see, my friend Darklord Matt only has 3 members of his gang left, while the Sleeping Dogs, I think, have quite a majority of their gang still left over as well. And not to mention, these guys are in cover positions. They have Darklord Matt flanked on both sides, and so pretty much he's pretty much just outnumbered as well as outgunned at this point. And with that, that takes us directly to the end of the game. My friend Darklord Mac decides to surrender at this point because he really doesn't want to have his other 3 members of his gang go through serious injuries, and there's no way for him to see like a good way to end this. So because of that takes us directly to the end of the end of the battle report, and we go directly to the post game and talk about exactly what happened to both gangs. Alright, so first of all, we're starting with Section 8. When it comes to the injuries, 3 members of the gang were injured, that is Redcap Killer, Red Harvest, as well as Val the Impaler. Redcap Killer suffered a grievous injury, so because of that, he will miss out on his next scenario for the campaign. Meanwhile, Red Harvest, as well as Val the Impaler, they just rolled out cold and they make full recoveries. For advancements, there were no advancements at this time because not enough of them had net enough experience points, but when it came from their territory, they earned 10 additional credits from their reputation because they get 10 credits for their reputation at all times. When it comes to the merchants, they end up winning 30 credits from the scenario, 10 credits from their reputation that they already carried, and they also managed to secure 60 credits from their patrons because at the end of the scenario, what ends up happening for Venator gangs, the gang leader does a work the territory action where they earn d6 times 10 creds for every point of reputation that they have, so he managed to get himself 60 credits for that one from his patrons. In the end, the Venators do manage to net 100 credits in total. And with that 100 credits, they purchased mesh armor for Red Harvest, so now Red Harvest has a 5-up armor save, and they also hired a new hunter named Noose Taggart, who they armed with a shotgun as well as mesh armor for 90 credits. When it comes to the reputation, the Section 8 do earn 1 reputation point for fighting against the Sleeping Dogs for the very first time, and they also get 1 reputation point from their settlements. However, they do lose 1 point of reputation for bottling out from the scenario, and that brings their total reputation to 2 points. Their current record currently sits at 0 wins as well as 1 loss, and their new gang rating now is at 1,110 points. Up next, we have the winners, which are the Sleeping Dogs. The Sleeping Dogs did suffer 3 injuries for their gang. That is Johnner St. Jude, Napalm Ned, as well as Ghost. Johnner St. Jude, as well as Napalm Ned, both suffered grievous injuries, so because of that, they will both miss out on the next scenario together. However, Ghost got an out cold result, and he made it full recovery. When it comes to the advancements, they had no advancements take place at this time. My friend Sergeant Sigmund didn't want to spend any of his experience points to do that. And when it comes to the territory, in the end, they managed to take over a narco den. So now the gang is carrying 2 settlements, 2 territories. One's a settlement, the other one is a narco den. At the merchants, they managed to win 10 credits from winning the scenario. They earned 25 credits from their narco den, which is the new territory they acquired, and they also earned 50 credits from their settlement, bringing their total net total to 85 credits in total for them to spend. In the end, my friend Sergeant Sigmund hired a brand new ganger named Reckless, who equipped him with twin auto pistols. He also purchased a sword for Ghost, and he took his last 5 credits and he put it inside of his stash. For the reputation, they do earn 2 points of reputation for winning the scenario. They also earn a point of reputation for fighting against Section 8 for the very first time, and they also earn 1 reputation from their settlement, bringing the Sleeping Dogs' total reputation total to 5 points. Their current record now stands at 1 win as well as 0 losses, and their new gang rating is at 1,080 points. So that's going to do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Instagram, Blogger, as well as Facebook for all latest greatest news about the hobby side of our channel. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys in the next one. Stay classy and peace out.